In the first case, Yan Yanzun got the pirate legend. In the second one, Anthony and Gritia got the court records, the shame bell, the goat payroll dispute, and enough colonial chaos to make New Amsterdam beg for mercy. But there is one person sitting behind both stories who barely gets anything. Her name may have been Margarita. She may have been Anthony's mother. She may have been from Cartagena. She may have been Morisco, part of Spain's Muslim-descended population forced into Christianity and later pushed towards exile. Or she may have been something even more complicated, a woman later writers half remembered, confused, or folded into the legend of Yan Yanzun after he became Murad Reis. I do not have her surname. I do not have her birth record. I do not have her voice. But I think she matters, because sometimes the missing person in the family tree is not a dead end. Sometimes she is the whole damn question. This is case number 3 from the Ancestorer Detective Agency, Searching for Margarita. The story usually starts with the men. Yan Yanzun, the Dutch privateer from Haarlem, who became Murad Reis, Corsair of Sallee. Anthony Janssen van Sallee, his son, later known in New Netherland as Anthony the Turk. Those men leave their marks in the record. Jan gets the legend, ships, raids, conversion, North Africa, the Republic of Sallee. Anthony gets the paper trail, New Amsterdam lawsuits, land grants, slander cases, banishment, and one deeply suspicious goat-based payroll dispute. But Margarita? Margarita gets a first name. Maybe. That is the problem. Some later accounts describe Anthony's mother as Margarita, a woman of Muslim or Morisco background, possibly connected to Cartagena, Spain. And if that's true, then she is not just a footnote. She may be the missing piece that helps explain why Anthony was later remembered as the Turk. Now that word needs care. When the Dutch called Anthony the Turk, they probably did not mean he was literally Turkish. Europeans often used Turk broadly for Muslims, North Africans, or people connected to the Islamic world. It was a label, a category, a shortcut. And like most shortcuts in history, it probably trampled half the truth on the way there. So where did that label come from? Was it because Anthony's father, Jan, who became Murad Reis in North Africa? Was it because Anthony grew up around Sallee, Corsairs, Islam, and the Atlantic Mediterranean world? Or was it because of his mother? That is where Margarita starts to matter. If she was Morisco, then Anthony's story does not simply begin with a Dutchman becoming a Corsair. It begins with Spain. It begins with the aftermath of the Reconquista. It begins with families who had once been Muslim, were forced into Christianity, lived under suspicion, and eventually expelled in huge numbers from Spain in the early 1600s. And Morisco was not just a Spanish Muslim, nice and tidy, easy level, thank you very much. A Morisco was someone caught in a brutal historical vice, ancestry, religion, identity, law, survival, and suspicion all squeezed together. If Margarita came from that world, then she may have carried a history of forced conversion and exile before Jan ever became Murad Reis, before Anthony ever reached New Amsterdam, before anyone in Manhattan decided to call him the Turk. It changes the whole emotional weight of the whole story. Because then Anthony's identity may not just be inherited from his famous father. It may also come from his almost erased mother. And I keep getting stuck there. History loves a man with a ship and a dramatic nickname. Women with missing surnames, apparently, get tossed into the archival junk drawer. But genealogy has a way of making the missing people, though, especially when they are your people. Now, the strongest breadcrumb I have is Cartagena. Anthony's Amsterdam marriage record reportedly describes him as a seaman from Cartagena, about 22 years old when he married Gritia Reiners before sailing to New Netherland. That does not prove Margarita was from Cartagena. It does not prove Anthony was born there. It does not prove he was Morisco through his mother. But it does mean Cartagena is not random. Cartagena could be his birthplace. It could be where his mother came from. It could be where the family lived before moving through North Africa. It could be the port Anthony used to explain himself in Amsterdam, because from Cartagena, made more sense on paper than son of a Dutch corsair in the middle of North African identity blunder. I don't know yet, and that's the honest answer. I don't know. Anna? There's also another possibility, and it gets even more complicated. Some traditions around Yan Zun after he became Murad Reis suggest a possible connection to the Moroccan court of Sultan Moulay Zidane, also known as Zaidan Abu Mali. Now that may refer to a later relationship. It may not be Anthony's mother. It may be a separate wife or partner. It may be true. It may be wrong. It may be one of those historical tangles where later writers took multiple women, multiple places, and multiple traditions and folded them into one convenient blur. Because apparently, even in death, women in the records are expected to be tidy and quiet. Rude. But this is why Margarita matters. If she was a Morisco woman from Cartagena, that tells one story. If she was connected to Morocco or the Sadian court, that tells another. If she was neither, but Anthony's connection to Cartagena still runs through her somehow, that still matters. And if later writers confused her with another woman entirely, that matters too, because it tells us how family stories get built, repeated, polished, and sometimes accidentally lied into shape. So this case is not about pretending I have solved her. I have not. This case is about refusing to let her stay as just a first name floating behind two famous men. Because Margarita may be the hinge between two worlds. Spain and Morocco, Christian and Muslim, Morisco and Corsair, Cartagena and Salih, the Mediterranean and New Amsterdam, a woman without a surname, standing behind a son, colonial records remembered as Anthony the Turk. That is why I started reaching out. I contacted archives in Cartagena. I contacted archives connected to Morocco. And because this line also connects into some well-known American family trees, I have reached out to Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., whose work on finding your roots has helped bring serious genealogy into the mainstream. To my surprise, Dr. Gates kindly connected my question to Nick Sheedy, the lead genealogist associated with Finding Your Roots. Sheedy did not hand me a neat answer. Honestly, I did not expect one. What he gave me was probably more useful, a professional reminder. With a mystery this old, you have to separate records from repetition. You have to ask what kind of document could even answer the question. A baptism record, a marriage record, a probate record, some legal document. And then you have to ask whether that record was ever created, whether it survived, whether anyone actually knows where it would be. That hit me hard because it's exactly the trap with Margarita. A story can be repeated for generations and still not be proven. 100 family trees can say the same thing because they all copied the same unsourced claim. And one careful researcher with one real document can matter more than 1,000 confident guesses. So this case is not about pretending I solved Margarita. I have not. It's about going back to the beginning of the story and asking, who first said this? What source did they use? And is there any record underneath the legend? That is the real work now. Not chasing the prettiest version of the story, not picking the most dramatic possibility because it sounds good in a video. Although for the record, missing Morisco mother connected to a Dutch corsair and possibly the Moroccan court is not exactly terrible television. But that is not enough. The story has to earn itself, and Margarita deserves better than becoming just another recycled internet claim. Maybe she was Morisco, maybe she was Moroccan, maybe she was from Cartagena, maybe she was connected to Moulay Zidane, maybe she was Anthony's mother. Maybe the whole thing is a tangle of mistakes, assumptions, and wishful thinking. The maybes are not the end of the case. They are the beginning. And that is what genealogy does at its best. It does not just collect names. It asks why some names survived and why others almost disappeared. Yan Zun became Murad Reis. Anthony became Anthony the Turk. Gritya became the woman under a shame bell. But Margarita? For now, Margarita is the woman I am looking for. This has been case number 3 from the Ancestorer Detective Agency and the lesson. Sometimes the most important ancestor in the story is not the one with the ship, the land, or the court record. Sometimes it is the woman standing in the silence behind them. And sometimes, if you are stubborn enough, that silence becomes the case.